I'm your host, Scary Pops, and everybody loves a good scare. So let's get into it.
Good Lord.
My name is Thomas, and I'm a photographer. I took a trip last year with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she talked me into adding a ski trip into the mix. We had the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent out a private log cabin. The second option seemed so much more romantic, and so I picked that one. Plus, it was a little bit cheaper. But the cabin was nothing luxurious. It was a single-floor, 4-room, cozy little thing. It had 2-person bedroom, a small living room, kitchen, and a bathroom. They may have been small, but the actual idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm was interfering with the cable signal, so we really didn't have much to do. One night it was just starting to get dark out, but there was still a decent amount of light outside, so I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. So I told my wife, I'll be back in 10 minutes, and I slipped on my boots and coat. And the moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed there was footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that blew under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled as whoever left them there turned and went to the opposite direction. I started to freak out, but I was not about to go inside and scare my wife, so I decided to give in to my curiosity and follow the prints. To the right side of the cabin, right away I noticed that they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me outside the window and waved at me. I waved back and then continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window on the other side. Someone was stalking us. How long have we been watched by this mysterious person? I found myself standing there for a good minute asking myself if I should follow the footprints anymore. For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I continued to follow the prints, and they led me to an opening into the trees. Just then I saw him. I saw a man wearing a black coat facing a tree. He was slouched down looking at the ground, still as a statue. I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders as though he'd been there unmoving for a long while. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have asked him if he needed help, but there was something the way he was standing there that just gave me the creeps. He just stood there, not doing anything. Just then, I heard him giggling. It wasn't an ordinary giggle, it was evil sounding. The giggling got louder, and he began to sound like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backwards without even turning around, making sure that he didn't notice me. And when I got out of visual distance, I turned around and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. I slammed the door shut, and my wife came over to see what was wrong. I could just see the worry in her eyes. I guess she saw the worry in my face and knew that something was going on. I told her what I saw, and she immediately started packing her things, telling me, we're leaving right away. I told her, no, we're not going anywhere because I'm not going to get a refund for leaving the cabin early. And I wasn't about to just up and leave because some weird guy was walking around outside. So she made a point of locking both bolts on the door and making sure all the windows were scaled shut. For the rest of the night, we stayed close together until it was time for bed. What if he's still out there, she asked. "There's no way he's still out there. It's like minus 10 degrees. Listening to the wind blowing outside along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows was a little relaxing, and I knew we'd be able to fall asleep quickly. But before we could, there was a knock at the bedroom window. We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from the person. I ushered my wife out of bed and out in the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing in the cabin to use as a weapon. Our only option was to run before something horrendous happened. I told my wife, we're gonna have to forget our luggage. We're gonna have to make a dash for the Jeep. We put on our boots and our jackets in the dark, and we got ready. Just then, we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side of the cabin. We took that opportunity to unbolt and run out the front door. As I ran, I pressed the Jeep's remote unlock button, and we hopped in the Jeep. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. It started with ease. But as soon as the headlights flashed on, we could see a man standing, facing the cabin. He stood totally still, just facing the wall of the cabin in the same position that I saw him earlier when he was hiding his face. We got the hell out of there and drove nonstop to the nearby ski resort. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things. We never saw that guy again.
This was just last winter, in early February. I was driving to my next DoorDash order. I was a bit tired, as I'd been driving for the last 4 hours, and it was almost 12 a.m. After this one, I was definitely calling it a night and heading home, as I was worried about getting sleepy on the road, especially with all the ice and snow. I was driving down a fairly empty road though. It was a side road that connected two of the main towns in our city, but there was a 5-mile stretch that had nothing. No buildings or houses or anywhere to stop. As I was driving down this section, I don't really know what happened, but I just got hit with a wave of tiredness that made me lose focus on the road for just a few seconds, but that was all it took, I guess. I hit a patch of ice and slid toward the side, and although I fully woke back up at this point, it was too far gone. I tried to steer back onto the road, but my car just slid straight off and into the small ditch between the road and the woods. It wasn't a bad crash at all, since the snow lightened the impact, but it still made me a little shaky, and I knew right away that it was going to be impossible to get out of this. My car was stuck on the incline of the ditch and in thick snow. I didn't even bother getting out to try and see how bad it was, though I did test my luck at trying to maneuver the car to get some traction, but if anything, I just made it worse. In the middle of trying to figure everything out, I noticed a car's headlights down the road. At first, I thought it was just a car passing by, but after a few seconds, it was clear that they weren't moving. Someone must have just been parked down the road with their headlights on, which I found to be a little unnerving at the coincidence of it being on this long, empty road. They weren't close enough to have stopped to try and help me, but they weren't far enough either to not see my headlights. I pulled out my phone and called my dad, knowing he'd still be awake and hoping he'd be able to help me. I'd never been in a situation like this, so I really didn't know what to do. He said he would call roadside assistance and then drive down to wait with me. I thanked him and felt relief knowing he would be down here in just a few minutes. I looked back out on the road, looking for the headlights from the car I'd just seen, but now they were gone. It was too dark to see anything that far without lights, so I didn't know if they'd driven away or were still there and had just turned off their lights. It started to creep me out the more I thought about it. I kept my eyes down the road, not looking away for more than a few seconds as I began getting paranoid. It was something about the silence as well that made it more uneasy, only hearing the wind outside my car and nothing else. Then, after 3 minutes of waiting, I saw a figure walking toward my car. He was down the road, coming from the direction where the headlights had been. I watched him as he slowly made his way through the snow, getting to just about 15 feet from the front of my car. Then he stopped. He stood there in the snow, facing me, but not moving. I couldn't see much of him as he had a hoodie covering his face, but the way he just stood there in my headlights started to terrify me. After a moment, I honked my horn softly a few times, just to let them know that I was in the car and that I could see them. They still didn't move or acknowledge me, but just as I was pulling out my phone to call my dad again, the man turned around and walked away, disappearing down the road. I still called my dad to let him know about this really strange person that was out here, and he said he was just a minute away. I stayed on the phone with him this time, and only 30 seconds later, I saw headlights turn on down the road and begin moving toward my car. Once they were right across the road, they parked and turned off their lights. I couldn't see over the ditch, but I heard a door open as I yelled through the phone what was going on. But then my dad's car pulled right in front of my view and screeched to a stop. I heard him yell at someone as they got back in their car and sped away. They didn't come back, but my dad said the guy was holding something in his hands that looked like he was going to break into my car with. Everything went okay after that though, and the car ended up not even having much damage to it. I'm not sure what was about to happen that night, but I know I'm really lucky to have not found out.